Hey, Walter Sorrells back with more tips for the knife maker. Today, making a prototype knife. So I manufacture a small number of what you might call private label knives, meaning that I actually produce the knife, but it's going to be under somebody else's brand. So this might be for martial artists or somebody who wants to get into the knife business but isn't equipped to make the knives themselves, but they want some US made type knife, not, something from China or something like that they're going to be buying in huge quantities. Anyway, today I'm going to tell the story of one of those knives. So kind of the first practical step in producing a private label knife is to make a prototype as a proof of concept. So that's all a prototype is just, hey, here's a design. Now let's turn this into an actual thing like this that you can pick up in your hand, and let's see how it comes out. So that's what I'll be doing today. So stick around to see how it actually comes out. The owner of Black Bear Outfitters, who's commissioning this knife, basically gave me a verbal description and maybe a small picture, and then from that I developed a computer model. Every designer kind of has their own signature, I guess you'd say, and this is pretty different from the kind of design that I ordinarily do, which actually made it kind of interesting as an exercise. So this knife's going to be a camping or bushcraft or outdoor type knife. Maybe some people call it a camp knife. So I'm producing the knife for Bear Trail Outfitters. Link in the description if you'd like to check out their website and maybe pick up the production copy of this prototype. Anyway, I printed that out and used it as a template to grind the profile. For steel, we're using Magna Cut, which is very popular steel these days. Now, one crucial thing about this design is that it's intended to be made on a CNC machine. That's where this whole process is going. So it has features that are a giant pain to make by hand. We'll see some of those as we go. So after laying out the design, we'll start by drilling holes in the tang. Normally I'd go to the grinder and grind the profile immediately after, but not today. See, here's the tricky part. The design's intended to have a striking surface that can be used as a glass breaker, and that also has sharp edges to facilitate using it as a fire starter. So getting these tight little radii is a little bit of a challenge on the grinder. There's also going to be a slot to be used for a lanyard, and that slot will track the outline of the striker's surface. Now this is super easy on CNC and very tricky to do by hand. Can you do this with a file, a drill, a jeweler's saw, all that kind of old school thing? Absolutely, but good luck with that. So I'll be using my manual mill along with a tool known as a rotary table. Works like this. Basically, you can turn this little handle and make it slowly traverse, and so you can use it to mill things, or, there's just all kinds of cool stuff you can do with it. I know this is not a tool that every knife maker has, but so be it. It's what I needed for this particular little project. So anyway, that clamps down to the table, and then I clamp the blank onto the rotary table. So a lot of clamping here. Then, by very carefully lining everything up, I can use the rotary action of the table to drill or mill all these surfaces so that they kind of harmonize geometrically. And here's the result. Looks simple, hard to get there. So keep that in your head because there's more to that I'm going to circle back to later. So next it's over to the grinder to grind the rest of the profile of the blade. Now most of this is pretty simple, but again, if I hadn't used the mill to get all these little radii laid in there, it would be quite tricky to pull off. As it is, the main challenge is just to get the spear point of the blade ground symmetrically. I do that by scribing a couple of layout lines so I know exactly where I'm aiming. Now I'll scribe center lines for the bevel grinding using a height gauge on a surface plate. Then it's over to the grinder again, starting with heavy 36 grit ceramic belts. Now, a quick note about the design. The idea is that this blade's made with a symmetrical spear point so that it can be used to drill holes for starting fires and things of that nature. The rest of the blade is dead straight. Now, this means that you also end up with a dead straight grind line, something, if you haven't tried it, is very challenging to do across long stretches of blade. So, even if you're very skilled at grinding, any little imperfection in the belt can cause the grind line to wobble. So I'll finish up at very slow speeds, very carefully, using a 3M Gator Grit belt. They don't cut fast, but they're really predictable, which helps in tricky grinding situations like this, especially for finish work. Now for heat treating, which is the hardening and tempering of the blade. For that, I wrap the blade in stainless steel tool wrap in preparation for heat treating. After quenching and tempering, I test it on my Rockwell hardness tester to make sure the procedure worked and I get something that I like. Then it's time for the handle. I'll be using a 1/4 inch natural micarta. As it turned out, I felt like the handle was a hair thin, so I upgraded the final design to a more hand-filling 300 thousandths of an inch, which puts the whole thing at 0.775 inches thick. Anyway, here I am using my cool little knife-making vise to aid drilling the holes. Yes, for those of you who have missed my last few videos, I actually produced these for sale. You have to buy them from Pop's Knife Supply, but anyway, it's a cool little tool. The key point with any kind of handle scale drilling operation is that you need the holes to line up dead perfect. And this little vise makes that super easy, even with irregular materials like horn and bone. Yeah, okay, I know, I produced this vise myself, I'm flogging it to you, but still, I really do like it. I use it all the time now. Anyway, the big trick here is getting a little cavity or indentation that kind of goes around the lanyard slot. Again, one of those things that's easy on CNC and takes a ton of time and effort using hand methods, even when you have a mill like I do. If I were making this as a custom one-off knife, I'd never do it this way. I'd just cover the whole thing with micarta and then run the lanyard hole right through the micarta. Now, time to clean things up. First, I'll grind off the heat treating scale using my surface grinder. Now, this is a pretty fancy tool, but you can do this very simply on a grinder too. There are various little magnetic tools that you can use to hold on to them. This happens to be one that I make. Anyway, the production model of this knife will have a tumbled finish, but that's a process that doesn't work so well for a custom knife constructed like this one. So I'll have a bright ground finish. Now here I'm finishing up the grind using a slack belt grinder to give it a convex grind. I ultimately wasn't happy with how the grind worked, so I went ahead and took the grind line all the way up to the spine, smoothing all the transitions with a surface conditioning belt. It was just nearly impossible to hold a straight grind line with that convex grind. Did that survive into the production model? Hang around to the end to find out. Then I'll attach the handle scales. The production model will have a screwed-on handle, but for a handmade blade, pins work much better. So here I'm running my cart of pins through it. Again, general lesson here, even if you're not doing CNC blades, if you ever make blades in multiples, doing a bunch of knives for friends at Christmas or something like that, you'll find that there's some techniques that are great for a one-off blade, but they'll really just kind of slow you to a crawl if you're doing them on a bunch of blades. And it's important, if you do want to make bunches of blades, to figure out what you can eliminate. And that's a lot of what distinguishes the prototype from the production model. Now grinding the handle to shape, something I've showed in roughly 100 videos by now, so I won't go into too much depth. But basically it's just the process of using the radii of various wheels along with J-weight belts on a slack belt fixture to slowly smooth all the transitions. The final handle feels great in the hand. All right, so here's where we landed. So it gave my customer a chance to, hold it in his hand, take it out camping, see what he liked, see what he didn't. And this resulted in a bunch of subtle changes, and actually some that are a little bit bigger. So this right here is actually the production version of it. We made the blade a little bit longer. It's a hair wider in this dimension. It runs over 11 inches now, whereas the prototype was more like 10. We got rid of the lanyard slot, so now it's got a hole, and that gives you a little bit more room to put cord or whatever through there. And then there are, as I mentioned, a bunch of small differences. Just as for instance, the fastener choice, the previous one had, the prototype had pins, whereas this has screws. Also, the convex grind went away. My client liked the idea of that as something to distinguish the knife, but it just isn't practical to do on a CNC-produced blade. As we mentioned, the production model will have a tumbled finish instead of a bright finish. We also went from Magna Cut to AEBL. Couple reasons for this. Magna Cut is a pretty tricky thing to source, and we just weren't able to find it in exactly the right dimensions that we needed for this particular knife. Additionally, AEBL's got some really nice characteristics that are good for a camp knife like this. The client also rightly thought that the spear point should be longer and should taper more. Frankly, the prototype version is a little clunky looking, so I think it really improved the looks of the production model to lengthen that point. By the way, if you're interested in possibly doing something with me similar to what I'm doing here, having me do a private label knife for you, just give me a holler. The contact information's in the description. There's a lot of complexity to doing this, and I'm happy to talk it through with you. Also, like I said up top, if you'd like to get your hands on the production version from Bear Trail Outfitters, again, link in the description. This was actually a pretty challenging project because I was trying to, fit in these little details that were going to be made, on the CNC machine, and which are pretty easy to do there and not so easy to do by hand. But it was also fun as a result of that. So hope you guys learned a little something about the process and, why you might go through all this headache of making a prototype in order to get to something in the end that you can really stand behind. All right, guys, thanks for watching, and keep on making those knives. Thanks for watching, guys. If you like what we're doing here, please subscribe and make sure that you click on that bell so you get notified of all the latest videos. Want to buy a knife from me? Check out my modern blades at tacticsarmory.com. Digging the channel? You can support our video making efforts on Patreon. I've been banging away on these videos for like 10 years, so I hope you'll show some love for all that hard work. Link in the cards and descriptions. Finally, if you're interested in making Japanese swords, check out my full line of Japanese sword videos where I show how to forge Japanese swords as well as how to polish them and how to make fittings, handles, and scabbards. WalterSorrellsBlades.com.